خذ يا الطارش يا المعنى خط بكتابك بترحيبك لو سرابك ليلك وجنة بالدجا في الليل تسريبه واسأل عن
Okay, I'm going to start as Muslims do in the name of God, in the name of Allah. Allah, linguistically meaning in the Arabic linguistic tradition, the deity, al-ilah. Like if you're a Christian and you were to read the Aramaic Bible, you would also say Allah, which means the deity. So I'll start in the name of Allah, in alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, to proceed. Brothers and sisters and friends and respected elders, I greet you with the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Which basically means may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Today's topic is a very big topic. Is life just a game? Relates to ideas of purpose in life, relates to ideas concerning the philosophy of religion, relates to ideas concerning existentialism, meaning what does it mean to exist? Who am I? Whose am I? For whom am I? Why am I? And sometimes, where am I? Depends if it's a Friday night or not. Yeah. Only kidding. So the point is, these are big questions. Now I don't claim to be an authority on the subject. I don't claim to have a vast array of knowledge or an understanding of myriad of subjects. But thinking is no one's monopoly. So what I want to share with you is some of my thoughts concerning this issue. Because sometimes when you see speakers deliver talks, there's this kind of rhetorical, sophist kind of an aura, yeah? That you see someone delivering a speech and you think, wow, he must be so amazing, so knowledgeable, man. And I want to break that. That's not true. It's just a normal guy who's been thinking about these things, and you know what? He may be wrong. And many times, I am wrong. Okay? So these are some of my thoughts, and I really want to engage with you guys in a very positive way as human beings, because we're human beings, but sometimes we don't act as human beings. You know, sometimes when we say, that guy is such a dog, or such an animal, okay? I think we shouldn't say that anymore, because animals always act in accordance to their nature. But it's human beings that sometimes don't act in accordance to their nature. We could be very inhuman or non-human, if you like. Anyway, that's a side issue. So, the topic is life just a game. Now, I want you to think about something very carefully. Try and imagine this. You go to sleep tonight, and you wake up. And you wake up in this factory. Okay? It's a factory. And all the windows are closed. You can't see outside. The door is shut. There's no way of going out. And you see all of your fellow human beings doing stuff and fixing things on the conveyor belt. And you're looking at this and saying, what do I do? Do I join them? But how can I? Because I have all these questions since waking up in this factory, which include, how the hell did I get here? What am I supposed to do? Who put me here? Why did they put me here? How can I get out? And if I get out, where am I going? This is the metaphor for life. This is the metaphor for life, people. And I want you to think about this deeply. It's not a cliche that religious people talk about. This is something that even atheist, skeptic, humanists ask. The answers are different, which we all know. But the question is the same. So, we have to think about our lives in this perspective. This is why an American writer once wrote that your birth, my birth, our birth, is like being born, then kidnapped and sold into slavery. Being born, your birth is like being kidnapped and sold into slavery. Do you know why? Because you didn't choose that you're going to be Bengali. I know that because I asked him earlier where he was from. You didn't choose that you're going to be a man. You didn't choose that you're going to be a male. No. Did I choose that I was going to be Greek? That looks Pakistani? No. We didn't choose these things. We didn't choose where we're going to be born, and we didn't even choose our parents. We didn't even choose our siblings or our socio-economic background and status. So in a way, it's as if we're enslaved to these things. This is why the existential philosophers like Kierkegaard and Heidegger, they said that human beings have this reality called thrownness, that we're just thrown into reality. An African child being born in Uganda had no choice. A Greek child being born in Athens had no choice. So we're thrown into reality, but we have a choice on how to react to reality. But from this perspective, we're still enslaved to genetics or social biological conditioning. So this is something we have to question. How now do I free myself from this? Because in the Islamic spiritual tradition, we believe in the soul, and the soul is called ruh. And the ruh comes from the root word for liberty and freedom, which is raha. Ruh is etymologically linked to raha. So in a way, the ruh, the soul, is seeking that freedom. The soul is seeking that liberty. But how does it achieve that? Now, I would disagree with the popular Western narrative. What I mean by Western is a small W, not the capital W, because I'm a Western, I was born in England, I'm British, and my parents are Greek. So it's a small W. It's not the rhetorical, religious, anti-colonial W, okay? So just to contextualize for various groups, such as the Telegraph, other places that tend to put spice and be flexible with the truth, okay? So, the Western narrative of this kind of like pursuits of freedom, and that freedom is a core value for the individual, which is the basis of individualism, I would tend to philosophically disagree with it. Why? Because we're always going to be in a state of this slavery. We're always going to be that child that was kidnapped and thrown into slavery. And this pursuit of freedom is actually just changing your slavery. This pursuit of freedom is actually changing your slavery. Because, let me explain this. Why do we do things and why do we act? We do it because we want to. So isn't that a form of slavery? You're enslaved to your desires and your ego. Hence the Quranic discourse, the book of the Muslim says, have you not seen the one who takes his own ego as his Lord, as his deity, as his object of worship? There's an element of slavery, so we're enslaved to our ego. What about our carnal desires, the bestial aspects of humanity? We do actions and we intend things for those reasons. Also, we're social animals, so we do things because we're part of a group. Because of social consensus, because of social conditioning, celebrity culture, L'Oreal, because I'm worth it. Yeah? We see that all the time. Even our sense of beauty is what you'd call a social construct. And if you study psychology, there's a theme called social constructionism. Now, there's a thinker called Vivian Burr who was pushing the idea of social constructionism. She wrote a book, Social Constructionism. I think it's published by Routledge. And she was essentially saying that we are affected by the constructs via the powerful, influential aspects of society, like the media, or the politicians, or the celebrities. And this creates a construct, okay? An easy way to prove this is look at MTV today. Rewind 15 years and look at MTV 15 years ago. Yeah? It's not the same. The way they dress and look, and even the language they use in their music wouldn't be allowed. Now that changes because of social constructs. The influentials facilitate a certain social norm. And this is the development of the social norm, which you could read about in social psychology. And social norms and constructs are developed because human beings want certainty. And because they're uncertain, they go to the social influential structures in society, say, okay, I'm going to follow this, or I'm going to be like this. and there's a sense of conformity to the social norm. So the point is, we act because of the social norm, because we're social animals, and we see this in our groups. You know, Muslims always look the same sometimes, yeah? With a little bit of differences. And you may see, for example, I don't know, if you have any Goths on campus, you know, the Goths, and I'm not judging here, I'm just trying to categorize them for simplicity. You know, they may look in a certain way. Or you have the rude boy, you know? I'm from Hackney, you know, the gangsters with the trousers below the backside, and they're walking as if they have something up their backside. Yeah? No offense. You know, they have a certain culture, which you may call the street culture. And you may have a certain lingo concerning that. Now, Wilber also makes a very interesting point concerning that we refer to this social construct or social norm, and that's why we act. So we're enslaved to the social construct, and she uses language. Connotations to certain words change our behavior. So we're even enslaved to the meanings that we have been taught for certain words. Take the word love. What's your name, sir? David. What does love mean for you? Whatever comes to your heart. Commitment. Nice. Nice. See, that came from a man. Men don't usually like commitment. This guy is he's an evolved man. Other men will never say that. Oh no, bro. So David says that love is a commitment, right? For others, it's not a behavior like that or a mindset. It's more of an internal feeling. And that's what we're generally brought up thinking love is just an internal feeling. Because when you read about domestic violence, what does the husband usually say or the partner say? But I love her really. Do you see? But 200 years ago, you'd see the old grannies, just like David, they would say, come here, let me love you for a bit. So it's a behavior. And meaning changes everything to the words that we use. And that creates a construct. And we're almost enslaved within that construct. So what I'm going to show you here is that, guys, there's no freedom. You're always going to be a slave. Slave to your ego, slave to your desires, slave to the construct, the social construct of the social norm or consensus. According to the Islamic spiritual tradition, in the words of Ibn Qayyim, a 14th century theologian and Islamic thinker, if you like, he said true liberty, that raha, as I said before, the ruh is connected to raha, gaining this sense of liberty, will only be achieved if you enslave yourself to the divine reality. Because by enslaving yourself, or having this ubudiyya in Arabic, the servanthood to the divine, it frees you from the ephemeral and empty nature of your ego. It frees you from the ephemeral and empty nature of your desires. It frees you from the ephemeral and empty nature of the bestial aspects of humanity. And it frees you from the ephemeral and empty nature of the social construct. So really, conceptually, someone who has a relationship with the divine, someone who has an enslavement from this perspective to the divine reality. In Arabic, we say Abdullah, meaning the slave or servant of the divine reality of Allah. Someone who has that is actually freed from the social construct, from the social norm, from their own egos, and from the bestial and carnal desires of their own selves. So really, religion from this perspective is extremely liberating. This is why when you may see some sisters, some Muslim sisters, they may wear their hijab, cloth on their head, or they may cover their face, or they may dress in a different way. They look different, okay? I would argue that, especially from a Muslim community perspective, our discourse should change, and we shouldn't really use the liberal mantra and say, well, it's my free choice. Which is fine, I'm not judging it, but I don't think that truly represents their perspective in the Muslim community. And if we want to care for the wider society, we should articulate who we are in a truthful manner and not say that we have to be just like everybody else and therefore we have the same constructs of freedom of choice, which we do, but I'm saying from the perspective of following the commandments of the divine, it's nothing to do with freedom of choice. But rather the act of wearing a piece of cloth, for example, I'm using women as an easy example, is actually an act of liberation. Because the woman doesn't do it, oh, because it's my free choice. Rather, she does it because it's an amr, it's a command from the divine. And the argument is not that it's just because of my illusory sense of freedom, but rather it's because I'm liberating myself, because I'm not doing an act just because of my ego. Because if it was my ego, then, you know, I'd be looking like Cheryl Cole and being on the L'Oreal adverts because I'm worth it, yeah? She's not doing it for the egotistical reason. She's not doing it because of social pressure. Because society now says, why are you wearing that thing? You're too young. You should be 90 and wear that, yeah? Or you should be dead, yeah? So she's not doing it for her carnal desires or the social construct. She's doing it for the divine reality, which is an act of liberation because it frees her from these ephemeral empty shackles. So the very act of wearing a hijab, the veil, the head covering, is an act of liberation from this perspective. Do you see, if you look at it from a different perspective, it's so empowering. It's all about seeing it from different perspectives. So how did we get here? From purpose of life to hijab. Well, the point is that if what I said is true from an existential perspective, what does it mean to exist? Who am I? Whose am I? Why am I? Where am I? All of these essential questions we have to answer. As I mentioned in the beginning, the analogy or the metaphor of the factory. We wake up, we're in this factory, we don't know how we got there, where we're going, and why we're there. So if this is true, this kind of conceptualization, this concept we're talking about, then we should start answering these questions. If we don't, then we're just not human beings, in my opinion. We're just robots. We're biological robots. We're just a reaction to our social, biological conditioning. Just like in Doctor Who, you have those, what are they called? Daleks, right? Exterminate, yeah? Give me my coffee. And many of us are like that. We wake up in the morning, we do the same thing. Brush our teeth, comb our hair, put on our clothes, go to Starbucks or Cafe Nero, depends if you're right wing or left wing. And then you go into school or university, you study, you may chill out for a while with your mates, play some footy, go to the gym, then go to sleep. Oh, and you eat, and obviously do everything else that a human being does. And it's an ongoing cycle of life, and you're just doing it and doing it and doing it, and you end up 50 and you've got a bit like Tyson thinking, what have I been doing for 50 years? And then you just do another thing that's very circular, if you like. So the point is, we don't want to be that kind of human being. We really want to think. We want to use these God-given rational faculties to answer these questions. So I think the first point is to find an answer to the question, does purpose make sense? Is it reasonable to attribute a purpose to our own existence? Now, I'm not talking about God here yet. I'm not talking about anything supernatural. Just the idea of purpose. And I want you to think of some analogies. Take the chair you're sitting on, okay? The chair you're sitting on is made up of carbon. It's non-conscious matter. It's inanimate, okay? That's the chair. What is the purpose of the chair? To hold you, right? To keep up your weight, to support your weight. So keep that thought for a while. Let me now transport you to this particular forest. There is a forest, and in this forest, there is a tree that has sap, nutritious sap. And there is a moth that flies and it attaches itself to the tree, and it has a nice kind of straw tongue, and it drinks the sap. Now the physiology of this particular moth is that almost instantaneously, very quickly, when it drinks the sap, it does a poo. It excretes what it has to excrete. And this is simultaneously almost. It's drinking the sap and it excretes what it has to excrete. Underneath this moth, there is a second moth, right underneath it. It's a different type of moth. Do you know what this moth does? It drinks up the excrement. It drinks up the poo of the first moth. And the reason, biologists tell us, is because if the first moth didn't have the second moth as its insurance policy, the poo or the excrement will be trickling down the tree, and the insects like ants will be able to follow the trail and eat the first moth. So the second moth is the first moth's insurance policy. And you're thinking, is Hamza talking sense? Is he making this up? No, go to BBC David Attenborough. So our taxes are worth something when we pay, the TV license. So the point is, you knew nothing about this second moth 3 minutes ago, or this moth, or this tree, or this reality 3 minutes ago. And frankly, if there was moth genocide, you wouldn't care. It would be water over duck's back. But yet, something so insignificant to you has a purpose, which is to drink up poo. First moth, but it still has a purpose. And something inanimate and non-conscious, like the chair, also has a purpose. So wouldn't it follow that maybe we have a purpose? We're far more, if you like, complex, or we have greater value, or from our perspective at least, than the chair and that moth? Doesn't it intuitively just drive us home to think, surely we must have some type of purpose? Now you may think this logic doesn't follow, but surely even emotionally and rationally, there's something there. There's something, this should open a window of opportunity for me to think about my life. Unless you want to think yourself as the same as the chair, and think yourself as the same as a moth that drinks the excrement of another moth. If you want to be on the same level of those things, then fine. But surely the ounce of ego that we all have really gives us a sense of, no, there must be something else. So I would argue just from these examples, there is a purpose. So if there is a purpose, how do we get to know and understand what this purpose is? Well, I would argue we have to use our rational faculties. Because our rational faculties are these tools that we have, these mental tools that we have, that are quite universal to everybody cross-culturally. For example, even the basic things like cause and effect, or things like basic logic, or necessary truths like mathematics. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. And to prove this is universal, if I said to you, what is 1 fufula plus 1 fufula? It's 2 fufulas. But you know what a fufula is? No, I just made it up, but you don't even have to know what a fufula is, right? Because these are these are necessary innate truths. So 1 fufula plus 1 fufula is 2 fufulas. I don't know what fufula is, but it's still 2 fufulas, right? So we have these innate universal truths that we can all use to come to a conclusion on what our purpose of life is. And I would argue, if we use these tools, we can really find the answer. And as I said in the beginning, I might be wrong. I'm just sharing my thoughts. I'm not an expert on these issues. I'm not a quantum physicist or an academic philosopher. I'm an amateur philosopher, yeah? I'm just an amateur dude with a big mouth. So I just want to share these ideas. So I think we can use these tools to come to an answer. So let's apply these tools to the universe. It is almost now, without a doubt, scientifically, empirically, which is a supporting argument, but also philosophically, that the universe rather, must have begun. It wasn't always here. That's the 1950s kind of attitude of the steady state theory of the universe, that, in the words of Bertrand Russell in a radio program, he said the universe is a brute fact. It didn't begin, it's not going to end, get over it. Live your lives. Thinking about it will get you depressed. But now we've moved away, especially from an astrophysical perspective, that the universe began. The universe began. And this is a supporting argument, because I don't really rely on science, because science is an ever-changing reality. But let's start with the supporting argument. And the supporting argument from this perspective is what you call the Big Bang. Everyone heard of this? Good. It's not that thing that happens after too many curries, okay? Now, the Big Bang, ladies and gentlemen, brothers, sisters and friends, there are various models for the Big Bang, but I think the strongest model is the model that has been called the Friedmann and Lemaitre model, which essentially says that the universe began at a point in time, and they call this point a singularity, but now they're saying it's a spatial-temporal boundary. It's like an apex of a cone. That space and time has a boundary. So space and time has a boundary, but t is equal to 0. It began at a point in time. This is a major view even held by atheists like Professor Lawrence Krauss, He's an atheist, an active atheist, but a well-established academic. I think he wrote the book Something from Nothing, and he agrees that the universe began as a spatio-temporal boundary. Even one of the most leading cosmologists, a Russian, Alexander Vilenkin at Cambridge University, I believe in 2010, he said, yes, we can't run away from a cosmic beginning. So that's his attitude. So if the universe began, there's some big questions philosophically. Maybe not scientifically or empirically, but for the thinking human being, there's some big questions. Also, we could understand that the universe began because if the universe never began, it means it's eternal. And if it's eternal, it means the past of the universe is infinite. But the infinite doesn't make sense in the real world, in the real material world as we know it. It just doesn't make any sense. And a good way of establishing this is saying, imagine there are 5 balls in this room, and at every possible moment we add another ball. Ball 6, 7, 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 1 trillion. Are we ever going to reach an amount of balls in this room that we could define as infinite? No, because you could always plus 1. Also, if we have an infinite number of balls in this room, and I take 5 balls away, how many balls do we have left? Infinity, or some logicians would say, infinity minus 5. But rationally, we should be able to count now how many balls are in this room, because it's 5 less than infinity. So this shows that the infinite is only based in the mathematical realm of discourse, with assumptions and conventions that make sense in mathematics. But in the real world, the infinite doesn't make sense. This is why even David Hilbert, the famous German mathematician, said, you know, the infinite has no basis in reality. Also, you have Aristotle, the Greek. Yeah? What did he say? He said the infinite is potential, never actualized. So from these 2 pieces of evidence, we know the universe began. We know the universe began. So this is an amazing point. If the universe began, then come on, we're not going to just suspend our thinking. We're human beings. You remember what we talked about in the beginning about waking up in a factory? We have questions. We're existential human beings. We think about our own existence and why and when and how and who and whose and where. All these big questions. So if the universe began, I think there are only 4 possible explanations. 4. Is there any more? Please tell me in the Q&A. Or if you're brave enough to butt in. The first one, the first explanation is that the universe came from nothing, or came via nothing. The second explanation is what you call self-creation, or self-causation. The third is that it was created or caused by something else that was created or caused. So created or caused by something else. I'm going to abbreviate it here, created or caused, so CC, yeah? And the final one, it was created or caused by something uncreated. Sorry for my handwriting, okay? Says a lot about my psychological disposition, yeah? So if the universe began, these are the 4 possible explanations. I know there is a 5th one, which is we don't know, but I don't appreciate that kind of fundamentalist skepticism. It's a bit too skeptical for my liking, so I'm just going to brush it aside. We could discuss it in the Q&A. So, could it come from nothing? Well, this doesn't make sense, because how can something arise from nothing conceptually? Think of it mathematically. What is 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0? 0. Yeah, exactly. Well done. And we know this intuitively. You know, in magic shows, for example, in magic shows, what do? We see on Channel 4, maybe there's a magic show, and there's a box, he does something and he pulls out a rabbit. Now, you're not shocked because you thought, oh my God, the rabbit came from an empty space. No, you don't. The reason you're shocked is because how did he trick me to make the illusion that a rabbit came from an empty space? Because you know intuitively, empty space, no rabbit, right? So it's an intuitive reality. Also, what we have to understand is that there are some contentions amongst physicists, because they quote the quantum vacuum, okay? Quantum vacuum is a sea of fluctuating energy, and they say, look, there are subatomic particles that appear from nothing. The problem here is that they equate the quantum vacuum with nothing. We're saying nothing is the absence of anything. They're saying nothing is the quantum vacuum, which in reality is something. This is a sea of fluctuating energy. So we could, I think, in a healthy way deal with that contention. So we got good reasons to believe that it couldn't come from nothing. What about self-created? Well, this is philosophically absurd, I think, because think about it this way, in a very crude way. Can your mother give birth to herself? Don't even think how it's going to look like. Because some people they got have an imaginistic mind. Yeah? But the point is, it's an absurdity. Can you exist and not exist at the same time? Because that's what it's implying. For something to self-create, it means it once wasn't in existence, but it had to exist before it existed in order for it to bring itself into existence. Confused? Exactly. So it doesn't make any sense. It implies that something existed and doesn't exist at the same time. So we know it's impossible for it to self-create. However, we have the likes of our beloved physicist, British physicist, Stephen Hawking. He says no, in his book, The Grand Design, that you can have self-creation. But he has some assumptions in his book. His assumptions are that you have to have the quantum vacuum and gravity. And if you have the quantum vacuum and gravity, therefore the universe can self-create. But there is an assumption here, that the quantum vacuum pre-existed the universe. That's the first assumption. The second assumption, I believe in my humble opinion, he assumes a quantum fluctuation model for the Big Bang Theory. And what's the quantum fluctuation model? It's very simple. That you have the quantum vacuum, and you just basically have fluctuations of subatomic events, and then the whole universe appears. If that's the case, he has to show that the quantum vacuum has been there eternally. Because if it wasn't eternal, then that also began, right? And if it's there eternally, then this universe should be destroyed because every possible scenario should have played out by now. So the way they go around this is saying the quantum vacuum also expands. But that's the problem, because if it expands, then there must have been a beginning to the quantum vacuum as well. Don't worry if you're confused. I'm just saying it to make myself sound good, okay? No, just in case there's physicists in the room, I just want to address this contention as well. So, his argument is based on contention and based on what I would argue an implausible scenario for the beginning of the universe. So self-creation is impossible. So we've got the other option. Could it be created or caused by something else created or caused? Well, I'm saying this is impossible too. Because if this universe was as a result of another universe, and that universe was as a result of another universe, and that universe was as a result of another universe, and this goes on forever, would you ever have the universe today? No, it would be an absurdity of an infinite regress. Because he's going to shake David's hand, saying, well done, your views on love are amazing. When he said love is commitment, shake his hand, right? But before I shake his hand, I have to ask the brother here, Muhammad, can I shake his hand? And Muhammad's a bit jealous, right? You know, typical Arab, you know? And he's like, no, I have to ask my friend next to me. Now, if that goes on forever, I'm never going to shake David's hand. No. Similarly with the universe. Say I'm a Marine, an American Marine, and I'm going to shoot an alien, okay? Which is probably anybody outside of Texas, yeah? I'm only kidding. So I want to shoot an alien from outer space, very naughty aliens, okay? We found one in the Nevada desert, right? And he's approaching. Sarge, can I shoot? Permission to fire. And Sarge says, you know, I have to ask permission too. And then that sergeant has to ask permission too. If that goes on forever, am I ever going to shoot? No. Same with the universe. So I'd argue that an infinite regress of causes is just implausible. So it shows to us that the best explanation is that this universe was created by something else that was uncreated. Because if it was created, then you got the infinite regress problem in it. It doesn't mean it's God, by the way. A lot of theists say Therefore Jesus, yeah? Or Buddha, or Allah, yeah? That's a bit of a jump. But we can conclude that this universe was caused or brought into being or created, whatever language you want to use, caused, brought into being or created by something that was uncreated. Now, let's keep with this thinking. Remember what we were discussing? Using these rational faculties, these tools that are universal to understand this. So if there's an uncreated creator or an uncreated cause, one cause, there are a few possibilities. Actually, not only there are a few possibilities, there are some things that we can conclude, which I call using conceptual analysis, which basically means using your brain. So if there is an uncreated creator, then it must be eternal, by definition. Okay? If there is uncreated creator, it must be eternal. Just like the philosopher Abraham Varghese, he said in the appendix to the Professor Anthony Frou's book, There Is a God. He was a famous atheist for 50, 60 years and he became a theist. In that appendix, he says, look, make your mind up. No one disagrees that something must be eternal. It's either the universe or what created the universe. But since we've got good reason to believe the universe began, and therefore it must be what created the universe. So what created the universe must be eternal. That's another way of looking at it. So it must be eternal. It must be powerful. I mean, this is not a joke. I mean, the whole universe came into being. It's not going to be, for example, you know, like a little fairy or something, is it? Yeah? I mean, this is the whole universe. I mean, look at the sun. One solar flare is equivalent to how many Hiroshima bombs? 100? 1,000? There's a hell of a lot of power there. Even if you split an atom, what happens? Nuclear pop, man, that's a big explosion. Yeah? So, it has to be very powerful. I would argue also, it has to have a form of intelligence or knowledge. Intelligence or knowledge. Why am I saying this? Because there are undisputable laws in the universe. If I drop this, what happens? It falls. Why? Because the law of gravity, exactly. The lawgiver implies an intelligence. The other point is that it must be immaterial. What do I mean by immaterial? Well, I mean the Quranic paradigm, which the Quran says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing like unto the Creator, nothing like Him. He transcends the universe. And why do we say this rationally? Because think about this. If I create the chair, do I become the chair? No. If I'm Bob the Builder, I create the building, do I become the building? No. This is why Ibn Taymiyyah, a classical theologian, he said that the creation, or the creator, is distinct and disjoined from the creation. The creator is distinct and disjoined from the creator. So he transcends material reality, which can be described as immaterial, if you want to use that term. The fifth point, he must be one, which is a monotheistic perspective. And why am I saying this? Well, there are many reasons. Let me give you one. And this is what you would call Occam's razor. Now, Occam's razor is a philosophical principle that you don't multiply entities beyond necessity, which essentially means the most comprehensive and the simplest explanation is the best explanation. So the most comprehensive and simplest explanation is the best explanation. What does comprehensive mean? It has explanatory scope, which means it explains most of the things. It has explanatory force. Saying that it's one is the simplest explanation and it's the best explanation. One all-powerful being is simple and it's the best because it answers most questions. If you said there was two, then fine, you may argue it answers the questions, but it also creates questions. Because you'd be thinking, how can two all eternal powerful beings interact with one another? So it's not comprehensive anymore. So according to the rational principle of Occam's razor, the most simple and most comprehensive explanation is the best explanation. And there's many other reasons we can discuss in the Q&A. Finally, number 6, it must have a will, or in Arabic, irada. Okay? It must have a will. Or the Islamic theologian said irada, which is a will, the ability to have an absolute will or free choice. Why am I saying this? If this uncreated creator or uncaused cause is eternal, and it brought into existence a finite effect, spatial temporal boundaries, the universe began, it's eternal, brought into existence a finite effect, the universe that began, then it can only mean that this uncreated creator or uncaused cause chose the universe to come into existence. And the choice indicates a will, and a will indicates can have a relationship with conscious beings in the universe. Look what we've done. From the Islamic spiritual intellectual perspective, using our minds, our rational faculties, we have given good reasons that the divine reality exists. An uncreated creator that's eternal, powerful, intelligent, immaterial, one, and has a will. This is in line with the most basic definition in Islam of God, which can be found in the 112th chapter. Qul, say, Huwa Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. Say, He is Allah, God, the one, uniquely one, immaterial, one. He's self-subsisting. He's eternal. He begets not, nor was He begotten, eternal. And there is nothing like unto Him. And the other words imply that He's intelligent and powerful. Allah is a name for a being that is conscious, in terms of has a will, and is intelligent, or powerful, or knowing. So all of these things are implied in these few verses. Now some of our friends in the atheist community would say this is God of the gaps. You can't explain the origins of the universe, so you squeeze God as an explanation. No. I'm not going to let them get away with that. It's not God of the gaps at all, because what we've done is we used our minds, reflected upon the universe, and then came to the conclusion there is an uncaused cause and an uncreated being that created the whole universe that has these attributes. Oh, it matches with our view on God. There's no God of the gaps, because we've gone through a rational, logical process. So we can conclude that the divine reality exists. Way! Okay, we've answered the question that's taken philosophers thousands of years to answer. Okay? Well, I think we've answered the question until you dissect me in the Q&A. So we have a strong argument here, but what does this mean? It doesn't really answer the question, do we have a purpose? Because this God could be a cold, abstract God. This God could be like an absentee landlord who just gave you the keys and run away. Sort it out yourself. Okay? This is the kind of deist position. In philosophy you have deism, which is basically philosophers or thinkers or even scientists who believe that, yes, a God exists, but He left us alone. Yeah? Can we adopt that position? I think no. Because I think if I'm going to buy a new phone, say the new BlackBerry that's come out with the Z10 or something, when I buy the BlackBerry, what's inside the box? The phone, the charger, the wires, the manual. When we develop something or create something or produce something, we give it a manual. And you may think, I could just use trial and error. Well, you can, but you'll never use all of its functions in the best way unless you read the manual. And why do we learn things the hard way? Right? So that would give us good reasons to believe that maybe revelation makes sense. That maybe this God or this uncreated being has announced Himself to mankind. Because if we do such a thing, then why would we? Intuitively doesn't make sense. Why would we attribute that to the divine? That He want to give us a message or a form of guidance. And I think this is very profound because there was about 50 people in this room. Now say all the doors were closed and we're going to be here for 60 days. And all we had was a basket of bread. We would have to create our own system and laws. We have to find out how to distribute the bread. To whom? When? Do children get less? Do adults get more? Do males get more? Do women get less? What amount of bread do we give each day? What mechanisms do we have in place to prevent people from breaking the law? Are we going to have due process? Are we going to have forms of punishment? So do you see, just 60 people in a room and just a bunch of bread, a basket of bread, it could end up in chaos if we don't have a form of guidance. And we've seen this, in my humble opinion, with capitalism. Look at us, man. 2 billion people living on less than $2 a day. 20 million children dying every 7 years in Africa because of the lack of distribution of wealth. This according to UNDP report. There's chaos. We may think we're fine because I live in London or Bristol and I'm, middle class and I have my money and I have my food, shelter, clothing. I don't care about the world. But if we think of it from a helicopter and alien perspective, we're thinking this amount of people are okay, but the rest of the world is living in disaster. They have the crumbs. So we still need guidance even when we think we have guidance, like the cap to this way, which I think is actually one of the biggest disasters for humanity, especially if you see what's happening in the third world. Now some people will blame capitalism, some people don't, but that's a different discussion. But the point is we need a form of guidance. And I want to argue this guidance must be external. It can't be internal. Why? Because if we were to judge ourselves who God is, we'd have 6 billion different versions of the divine reality. Because we're all different. We come from different social biological conditioning, different traditions, different learning, different cultures. We have 6 billion different gods. It's no wonder that since 6000 BC in times of Sumeria, we've invented 3,800 names for God. God knows. Yeah? So many names. So I want to argue that external revelation makes sense. Now, even if you don't believe in revelation, I believe there is revelation and we can have good reasons to believe in it. Now from an Islamic perspective, and this is where the purpose of life comes in, we would argue if we could verify that this book, the Quran, the book of the Muslims, is from the divine, then we justify what it says about our purpose in life. And our purpose in life is to worship God. Do you remember what I said in the beginning? The only way to free yourself from the shackles of your ego, your carnal desires, the bestial aspects of reality and man, and the social pressure of social consensus, is by worshipping, enslaving yourself to the divine reality, which frees you from these things. So our purpose in life is to be free from these things by enslaving ourselves to the divine reality. Because God says in the Quran, إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. He has created us except for no other reason but to worship Him, which means to be a servant of the divine, to love Him, to refer to Him, to obey Him, and all these other amazing spiritual things, okay? So, but the question is, can we verify the source of this purpose, which is the Quran? And I think we can. Because when we look at the Quranic discourse, the book of the Muslims, we see that it's a very intrusive text, a very kind of imposing text. It wants to impose itself on mankind. But this imposition is positive because it wants to make you think. And the way the Quran does this is by engaging with your aql in Arabic, with your intellect, and with your nafsiyya, with your internal psychological disposition. And the Quran achieves this by asking profound questions. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And in themselves, do they not see? أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Do they not reflect within themselves? وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus do explain our signs and evidences for those who reflect. The word يَتَفَكَّرُونَ comes from the Arabic triliteral stem فَكَرَى, which in the classical tradition means the thing that you're reflecting upon, the thing that you're thinking about, the thing that you're pondering on, you must inquire deeply about its implications. Don't be a desert romantic, sitting on the chair, playing with the sand, looking at the stars and drinking a glass of milk to make it Islamic. We don't drink alcohol. For most of us anyway. So, don't be a desert romantic, look at the thing, inquire about the implications of the object of meditation. So the Quran is encouraging you to think. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Have you not seen the camel and how we created it? Also, the Quran goes even further than this, brothers and sisters and friends. The Quran challenges mankind with regards to its authorship. It's an intellectual challenge. In the second chapter, called Surah Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, the Quran says in verse 23, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Which means, if you doubt this book, skeptic, atheist, humanist, those sitting on the fence, those in the fence, everybody, if you doubt this book, then bring one single chapter like it and call in your witnesses and supporters besides God. In kuntum sadiqeen. If you are truthful in your claim of doubt, if you're certain in your doubt, the irony, yeah? If you're certain in your doubt, if this is real doubt, then bring something like it. Challenge the Quranic discourse. And this relates to a whole array of what Muslims would call miraculous features of the Quran. Now, we don't have time to go through all of them, but what I want to do is first talk to you that miracles are coherent philosophically. Now, traditionally from a Western perspective, according to David Hume, the famous kind of Scottish skeptic, he influenced the philosophy of science and the philosophy of religion. David Hume said that a miracle is what? A miracle is a violation of natural law. Violation of natural law. Now this is an incoherent definition. It's not very Islamic either, according to our theology. Because what are natural laws? Natural laws are just inductive generalizations of patterns we perceive in the universe, which basically means induction is a thinking process where we conclude for the general via the limited. So we take a limited set of data and then we conclude for the general. So I go to Wales, I want to find out what is the colour of sheep. I view 200 sheep and they're all white, therefore all sheep are white. But sheep can be black as well. But that's the limitation of the inductive method, something David Hume actually exposed. So induction is not certain. So if something goes against what we've concluded by induction, like what we see to be natural law, it doesn't really make it a miracle, because it could be just part of the pattern. Or maybe we haven't been looking hard enough, so it doesn't necessarily mean it's a supernatural act. And I would agree with David Hume. It's incoherent. But the Islamic philosophical or Islamic thought perspective on miracles is very profound. And this exposes the amazing nature of the Quran, because the Quran tells us stories so we could learn from them. And it talks about Pharaoh, in Arabic Fir'aun, and Moses, in Arabic Musa alayhi salam, upon him be peace. And we know the narrative. Moses was told by God to say soft words to Pharaoh to soften his heart. Okay? Something that we should do to not only within ourselves but to the rest of the community. We don't even adopt that. I mean, Pharaoh in the Quranic paradigm is the worst of creation, one of the worst of creation, because he thought he was God. The arrogance of Pharaoh. But yet God tells him to say soft words. But yet when we speak to our mothers, we're not even as soft as Moses is to Pharaoh. Something to reflect on. So, the point I'm trying to say is this. God told Moses to speak soft words to Pharaoh, but in this kind of the amazing platform in front of the Pharaoh, he summoned his magicians to do these illusory acts, and they created so-called illusory snakes. God told Pharaoh to throw his staff, and his staff became... Sorry? Yeah, told Moses, and I do apologize. Told Moses to throw his staff, and the staff became a... It's not a worm, it's a snake. Eh? There you go. It's a snake. This story not only gives us lessons about how to deal with oppression and about patience, because God gives us in the Quran an amazing supplication that Moses was taught, or Moses said to God, untie the knots of my tongue for me to give the truth, to show you that what the truth is to the people. So there's a spiritual aspect of the story, there's a political aspect of how to deal with oppressors and how to deal with them, but also there's one on the philosophy of miracles. It's so powerful, Quranic stories, because they give you an array of information and knowledge. So the philosophy of miracles is this. The staff became a snake. This is not a violation of natural law. This is what you would call an act of impossibility, or in technical language, an event that lies outside the productive capacity of the nature of the event. Because the miraculous event here is the snake. The nature of the event is the staff. But how on earth can a staff come into a snake? This has nothing to do with natural law. Because what's in the staff? Basically just carbon. But what's in the snake? Yes, carbon. But you have silicon, nitrogen, calcium, maybe phosphorus, nitrogen. Said that again. You have all these chemical compounds and chemical constituents that don't belong to the staff. So there's an additional material that was added for the snake to appear. But we see the staff transforming to the snake. So it shows there's an act of impossibility, because we can't find a natural explanation. In other words, there is no causal or logical link between a snake and a staff. And that's what miracles are in the Islamic tradition. An act of impossibility, an event that lies outside the productive capacity of the nature of the event. In other words, there are no causal or logical links with the miraculous event and the nature of the event. So, is there a logical link with a snake and a staff? There isn't at all. Unless you can claim that someone was there and he added all the calcium and everything and made it an animate object, which is impossible because we see staff thrown on the floor, snake appears. So it's an act of impossibility. And this is far more coherent. So we believe the Quran is an act of impossibility. Now, without going into much detail because of time, the reason we believe the Quran is an act of impossibility because the Quran is considered a linguistic miracle, a literary miracle. Because in the Arabic language, there are certain forms, literary forms, that every time you express yourself in the classical tradition, it's in certain categories of speech. Prose, rhyme prose, poetry. Poetry has the al-bihar, the 16 rhythmical patterns of poetry. Prose is further categorized in 2 other forms. Saj'a, rhyme prose, mursal, straightforward speech. You have a combination of prose and poetry called maqama. So there's all these different styles. I don't want to bog you down with technicalities, but the point is, it's a linguistic and literary miracle because the Quran de-scopes the Arabic language and it's not only a unique literary form, but it's inimitable, which means it cannot be replicated. Even though we have the 28 letters and the finite words and grammatical rules at our disposal, and they've been exhausted and we can't create the Quranic form. So it shows that the Quranic form, there is no logical causal link with the Arabic language because when we exhaust the Arabic language, we can't create its form. It is no wonder Professor Bruce Lawrence from Duke University in his book, The Quran, a Biography, on page number 8 says, Quranic verses as tangible signs are expressive of inexhaustible truth. They signify meaning laid within meaning, light upon light, miracle after miracle. Also you have the likes of Professor Martin Zamet, the Dutch scholar. He said, notwithstanding pre-Islamic poetry, the Quran is the most eminent written manifestation of the Arabic language. So this is why we believe it's a miracle. Now you may ask me the following question, and we're going to end in 5 minutes. And the following question is this: but I don't know the Arabic language, so I don't really relate to what you're saying unless I just believe in what you're saying. I think I can argue that for you to reject the Quran today would be equivalent of rejecting your own mother. What's your name, sir?
Ash.
Ash. I want you to prove to me, if you can, in the best of your ability, that your mother, is your mother alive? Mm-hmm. Your mother is your mother. She's the one that gave birth to you. Just give me some proof. Just have a conversation.
Right now, or could I get a paternity test?
You can. Good. Is that why you believe that she's your mother? Because you haven't got the paternity test. Do you believe she's your mother now?
Yes.
Good. Why? And it's got nothing to do with the test because you haven't done it yet.
No, there's a lot of evidence that points that way.
Go for it.
Well, first of all, my dad hasn't left her. So I'm presuming that everyone who was there at the time has said that she said that, and I've no reason to doubt her word on the subject. There's a lot of evidence like that. I can carry on.
Okay, so your dad hasn't left her, and your dad said so, he testified to it. Mom testifies to it, and other people testify to it. And some may argue, well, I have video footage and I have photos. But for God's sake, how do you know that was you? Unless you came out the way you are now, which is impossible. Yeah? So still, you have to rely on the testimony of your father, your mother, and other people. So that sure knowledge that you had, that your mother gave birth to you, is based on authentic and validated testimony. In epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, in epistemology, this is a valid source of knowledge, testimony. So your proof is just testimonial. Yeah? Now some may say, what about DNA? Well, you don't believe she's your mother now just because you think you have you don't have a DNA test as a certificate on your wall saying she is your mother. Yeah? All the evidence that we have is testimony. Even the world being round, I would guarantee you most of you have no proof why the world is round apart from testimony. Because my geology teacher told me, and all these books have this round thing in the pictures, and it looks like Earth, and it's Earth because someone told me it looks like Earth. I'll tell you a really interesting story. There was this gentleman who didn't really like the Quranic discourse. He thought it was a 7th century medieval text, and he said, you know what? I don't like your tradition. It's backward because the Quran says the world is flat, which it doesn't, by the way, but that was his interpretation. And I said, okay, fair enough. I was a bit cheesed off. I travelled all the way to Birmingham or something just to see him. Obviously, it was a bit of ego, which I shouldn't have used, but I'm telling you, it was the most fascinating evening in my life. One of the most fascinating. I said to him, okay then, yes, the world's flat. I believe that. I don't, but I said that. I believe the world is flat and the Quran says so. Let me ask you a question. You prove to me the world is round. If you think this is the gospel truth to you, no pun intended. You prove to me the world is round. And I'm telling you, he changed so many colors that day. I've never, he's like a chameleon, yeah? He was Rainbow Man. And he said to me, well, we learned it in school. So, if the teacher says something else, you're relying on the testimony. What's your evidence? Empirical, as if you think empiricism is so the only way to form conclusions about life. You tell me. Okay, so we have photos. Yeah, but you have to believe that's Earth. That photo is a picture of a reality. Someone has told you it's Earth. So it's someone else's testimony. Well, so many people have said it. Oh, so you're relying on consensus, are you? I want evidence from you. And he was arguing, he was saying, well, if I'm on top of a mountain, I see the curvature of the Earth. I said, all you see is this. You don't see that. So there's no evidence. And he was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What's going on? I can't explain this. And he was actually getting really upset. And this guy's like a scientist. Yeah? And then after he said, you know what? Night and day. The alternation of the night and day. And then I picked up a verse in the Quran and it says, the alternation of the night and day. And there's a word in Arabic, taqweer, which means to take like a piece of cloth and wrap it around a turban around someone's head. And we revolve, we alter the night and day around. I said, what you've just done is giving me a proof that the Quran has given you for the world is round. So don't tell me things that the Quran says the world is flat. And I'm telling you, I felt so great after that day, man. It was beautiful. I'm telling you, it should have been filmed, man. It was a classic moment. Hey, the point I'm trying to say to you is that even me believing the world is round is based on testimony. I don't know the mathematics. I didn't do the math in geology. I don't know. I have no clue. There's indicators, but I don't have what some people would call empirical evidence that the world is round. It's all testimonial. Now the reason I'm mentioning this is just to justify that testimony is a valid source of knowledge. That's why Professor C. Cody, in his book Testimony, I think it's called A Philosophical Introduction, he says many things that we believe in is based on testimony, like actually blood travels our body and the way human beings are born is based on testimony. Not many people have experienced this for themselves. And this is why you have the Emeritus Professor Keith Lehrer in the book The Epistemology of Testimony. In his essay, he says, fine, there are criteria for testimony, because you can't just believe anybody. It has to be authentic and valid, and it has to be linked to trustworthy sources, and we have to be trustworthy in our understanding of their trustworthiness, and the reality itself can't go against known established truths. There's a whole set of criteria, but the point is, it's a valid source of knowledge. Now, concerning the Quranic discourse, amongst authenticated and valid testimony, such as the Western and Eastern scholarship, they have said that no one has been able to imitate and challenge the Quran. If that's true, you don't need to know Arabic, because there are just few possibilities on coming to that conclusion. Because if that's a testimonial truth, based on authentic and valid testimony that no one has been able to challenge the Quran, as Professor Arbuthnot, an Orientalist and Arabist, said, that although several attempts have been made to challenge the Quran, none have yet succeeded, then we could say, well, there's few possibilities. It either came from an Arab, it came from a non-Arab, it came from the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, or it came from God. And we could just use our logic to understand what's the best explanation based on that testimony. Well, it can't come from an Arab because the Quran challenged the Arabs in the 7th century, and they were best placed to effectively challenge the Quran, and they failed. Even though there was a great political desire desire to annihilate the truths of Islam, because the Quran came and de-scoped the socio-economic atmosphere at the time. So they were getting money from polytheism. Quran says there's no many gods, there's one God, worship one God. And they were fighting the Muslims at the time. So they had all the motivation to try and challenge it, and they tried to and they failed. This is why historically we have reports from Walid ibn al-Mughira, who was the best linguist of the time, and he said, by God, this is not from a human being. So we know it can't come from an Arab. Some may argue, well, that's history. What about today's Arab? Maybe today's Arab can challenge the Quran. Well, rationally this is even false. Why? Today's Arab has come from a heterogeneous society. Arabia in the 7th century was far more homogeneous, so the language was purified. Today's Arabic has gone through linguistic degeneration, because it's based on a heterogeneous society, many different cultures having linguistic borrowing and sharing words. This is why if you go to Egypt and you say passing the telephone, you would say telephone. They've anglified, right? Also, if you go to some villages in Iraq, do you know how they say chocolate? Nestle. From Nestle, was it Nestle? The company? So they call it Nestle. See the linguistic borrowing there? Even television. Television. Yeah? So rationally, it's impossible. So it can't come from an Arab. What about a non-Arab? Well, even the Quran says it can't come from a non-Arab, because this book is Arabiyyun Mubin. It's pure clear Arabic. So therefore you need to be an Arab, know Arabic, to challenge the Quran. So it can't be an Arab, can't be a non-Arab. What about Muhammad upon whom be peace? And there are two key evidences to show it can't come from Muhammad upon whom be peace. Number one, every human expression, if you have the blueprint, can be replicated. And you can see this with art. Post-Impressionism, Impressionism, Monet. You have replicas of this work because we see the blueprint. We see the design, the brush strokes, the texture, the kind of brush used, the techniques, and we can emulate and replicate that. That's why there's very expensive replicas. So they replicate the artistic genre. This is the same with language. Shakespeare, he's not unique. He used the trochaic meter, the Arabic pentameter, blank verse, which were used by many other literateurs like Christopher Marlowe. And even Christopher Marlowe has been attributed to actually authoring some of Shakespearean works. So he may be unique in terms of the way I feel. Oh, it's so great. To be or not to be. Whether it's noble in the mind of man to withstand the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to bear up arms by doing so end them. Shakespeare was a jihadist. Yeah? I use that sometimes. You know when people take verses of the Quran and they run away, and they ignore the rest of the values in Islam, and they decontextualize verses. I call them Shakespeare saying, I got proof that he was a jihadist. Yeah? You know, calling to violence, right? Bearing up arms. Anyway, so we have the blueprint, but yet we can't emulate it because the Quran is still with us today and the blueprint exists. The language, the letters, the words, the sound, the meaning, but we haven't been able to imitate the Quranic discourse. So it can't come from a human being. Also, if you study psycholinguistics, you see that when you look at a text, you know the author is in the text, some of his characters. Shakespeare, some of Shakespeare is in Shakespeare. Homer, some of Homer is in his Iliad, in his works. That kind of psycholinguistic perspective, the emotive character of the language. But the Quran, from a psycholinguistic perspective, is in the divine voice. Even though the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, suffered a 23-year career of ups and downs, prophetic career. His wife passed away, his beloved uncle passed away, his children passed away, his companions were tortured and abused, he was boycotted from his beloved city, he was stoned by children for hours. He was engaged in battle to defend the state, which included Muslims and non-Muslims, by the way. And yet, none of that emotion is in the Quranic text, it remains in the divine voice. And there's many other reasons why it couldn't come from Muhammad upon him be peace. But these two suffice. So therefore, the best explanation, it came from the divine reality. So, to reject that is the equivalent of rejecting that your mother is your mother. Because they're both based on authentic and valid testimony. You believe the chains of narration, the narratives of your mother, your father, and the midwife, that yes, she is your mother. And we should believe the authentic and validated academic testimony from Eastern and Western scholarship that this Quran has been reproduced and is inimitable. So therefore we draw the logical conclusions it must be God. If we reject that, isn't it equivalent of rejecting your own mother? So this is why we believe as Muslims, our life is to worship the divine reality because it says so. And we can verify that rationally. So, thank you very much for listening. I'll open up to Q&A. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك إليك. Thank you very much for your patience. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair for fantastic talk. Q&A.
Questions and answers. Anyone?
Hi, quite early on in your talk you spoke about how we're enslaved in many different ways,
Yeah.
and one of them was by our sort of desires. Why is it different to be enslaved to Allah than to be enslaved to what we would like?
Yes. Well, they're both slaveries. That was my point. The point is, you are enslaved to your desires, and you could also be enslaved to Allah. Conceptually, what is more profound? Because we believe that Allah, by definition, knows Ash better than Ash knows himself. Because He created you. He knows everything, right? Allah knows Hamza better than Hamza knows himself, right? So if you were to choose your slavery, where would you go? Why would you go with your desires? Would you go the one that transcends all of that? So that was my point here. This is why the ruh, the soul, links to the word the raha, which is liberty and freedom, and we seek that. But we're never going to get that really. And the way to achieve that is by enslaving yourself to the divine, because the ephemeral aspects of world, and the dunya in Arabic, meaning the kind of lowliness of the world, like your ego, your desires, and social pressure. These things you can free yourself from the shackles of these things by worshipping and referring and enslaving yourself to the one who created them in the first place. Because by definition, He's going to know them better than you do. Do you see? So that's where the kind of, it's like a more of the paradoxical liberation slavery. Yeah? Like you liberate yourself from the lower slavery to the higher type of slavery, which in the Islamic tradition is seen as positive because this is the divine. I mean, you know, there was one Muslim who recently converted to Islam, South African rugby player. He's an amazing brother. Very natural kind of man. You know those alpha males? Goes in a room and there's light everywhere, yeah? He's a really, really nice guy. And he said to me something over dinner once, he said, you know, how can you not give the due respect to your Creator and bow your head on the floor? Because He created you. You know, even that simple, profound concept, rather than symbolically bowing to the things that have been created by the Creator. It just logically follows that you refer and worship and enslave yourself to things, to the Creator rather than the creation. As the Quran really aptly says, is the one who creates like the one who creates not. So that would be my perspective. And that would be the difference, because if you think it's the same, then conceptually you'd have to justify that desires are equivalent to Allah. But how can that be when Allah created the desires and He transcends desires and He knows them better than they know themselves? You see? So from a value perspective, obviously Allah is infinitely more valuable than your own desires. So who are you going to refer to? That would be the point. If you want to make an analogy, which is very difficult to make any analogy, but consider it this way. Say you're a 5-year-old, or even you now. What do you study?
At the moment I'm doing a Masters in Product Innovation and Development. Engineering and
Engineering, okay, good. so say in your Masters, you have to do something to do with maths, okay, and you don't really know much about maths, and the professor is teaching you calculus or set theory, and you have no clue, but you jump on and say, Professor so-and-so, you idiot, yeah? What are you talking about, yeah? Otagwan, yeah? You get all street on him. And he goes, okay, what's your problem? And you say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, this is exactly what we're doing to God in a way, because the professor obviously knows about set theory calculus better than you do. He's the authority in this matter. But what we do as human beings is we have the approach of like screaming and shouting at the authority because we think we know best. It's all about ego really, isn't it? But intrinsically and by definition, God is the one that transcends and knows more. So we should be referring to him rather than being that kind of kid that shouts at the professor that he knows everything when he's there to learn. So that's the analogy I would use. I don't know if it's a good one, but I would use that analogy. Does that make sense, Ash?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any more?
One thing with the talk, when you used the analogy of true liberation is slavery. So I was thinking about it, and the word slavery can actually itself be very. It's actually giving yourself, isn't it?
Yes.
Which is actually the same thing, really, because if you enslave yourself to something, you're actually giving yourself to that thing.
Yes.
But lots of people that have hung up with the words thinking of slave or something. So we give ourselves to the example of God, to believe or following His commandments, like the example of a Muslim sister that decides to abandon her past of not wearing hijab and completely assimilating herself with each institution of looking like a reflection Muslim, and then acting apart.
Yes.
And one part of that is actually wearing the hijab. Is actually the means of complete liberation.
Yes.
You said that you shouldn't say that she decided to do that because it was something of conviction. Isn't it good to say that no, she did decide to do that because she saying that it wasn't my choice. It's like most people outside of religion think that you just fall you're marked to silly beliefs. Yeah? That, other people have told me to do that, yeah, and said that's what we've done.
Yes.
No, I've decided to do that because I use my higher intellectual capacity, yeah, to decide for myself that that's what I wish to do because of the great benefits behind it.
Yes, but basically saying the same thing. The basic what I wanted to say here is, once you adopt that belief, do you now have a choice within the construct of your belief to not follow the commands of God? No, because it's a command by definition. That's what I meant. But yeah, we're basically saying the same thing. I want to add something here just for non-Muslim audience. Islam is not just about externality, because sometimes when we look at Islam, we say, look, it's all about the beard, but don't goats have beards as well? It's all about the hijab and covering, but don't slugs cover? We call them snails, yes? They got this covering. But you have this type of reality. Now the thing is, Islam is not just externality, and that's a big fallacy that we've adopted as Western Muslims, a lot of us, yeah? We think, it's the way you look, and things that the tick box things that you do. But in classical Islam, especially in the first 3 centuries, Islam was never just seen like that. Take the concept of modesty. Now the concept of modesty is external and internal. For the man, it's covering his navel to his knees. For the woman, in some traditional scholarship, is covering all her body apart from her hands and her face. Okay? And there's other views, but let's just stick to that for now. That's the definition of external modesty. But there is actually a definition of internal modesty. What does that mean? That your heart, you're doing these things for the sake of God, to please Him, not for anything else. And also that you have an internal psychology and disposition of modest behavior. Let me give you some striking examples. I'm going to use women again, and I'm not doing it on purpose, but it's just an easier example. You may have a woman who can cover her hair, her face, and all you see is an eye, right? Everything is black, okay? But she could be so immodest in her psychology. Are you right, love? Yeah, I've seen this before. Especially in Canada, yeah? There's a number of Muslims there. You're right, love? Yeah, she's all covered. She's like all over the place. Like, what the heck? Yeah? And you can have women who may wear a certain low neck, whatever, her hair's out, she's got makeup on, but she's got such a modest disposition. How you doing, Brother Hamza? It's really good to see you. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a question. I mean, that's a modest disposition. They're both wrong and they're both right in the Islamic perspective. The first one's right because of the external, but she's wrong because she doesn't have the internal. The second one's right because she has the internal, but not the external. The whole point of Islam is bringing them together to become a holistic human being. So when we see people, don't think Islam is just about external, but the external is a manifestation of what's internal as well. But we have to be very clear it is both. This is why in our prophetic traditions, the Prophet Muhammad upon him peace said that no action, especially if it's an action of worship, is going to be accepted unless you have the right niyyah, intention. And if you don't have the right ikhlas meaning sincerity, doing it sincerely for the sake of God, not for the sake of your ego. Because you could see a person, they could follow all the external commandments of God, and on the day of judgment they have divine alienation. They run away from His mercy and they enter into the fire. Although they did everything right, it's because their heart was in the wrong place. So it has to be both. So I don't want to leave you with the false understanding that Islam is just about the externality, but we have a rich tradition. This is why in Surah Al-Shams, in the chapter of the sun, I believe, Allah, God, He swears 11 times for one topic. And nowhere in the Quran does God make an oath 11 times just for one topic. You know what that topic is? Tazkiyah, purification of the heart, purification of the soul. This is why God says in the Quran, no one's going to be safe on the day of judgment except those with qalbun salim. Qalbun salim, the pure, sound heart. So I thought I'd add that in. So, you know, because we have that perception, especially when you look at Muslims, it's not about what they look like and what they do. You know, they headbutt the floor 5 times a day. You know, but it's more than that. There's a whole range of, you know, spiritual focus as well. And this is not a new, innovative thing. It's part of our early tradition. It's part of the prophetic narrative. You know, we have this concept of khushu', yeah, which is the kind of broken heart, this love, this submissiveness when you're in prayer, this connection with the divine reality, which sometimes we don't adopt, because we think it's just all about, you know, action, praying, that's it. But it's not. It's all about the internal as well. So it's both. So we have to bring them both together. So it's like very important for us to consider.
Yes, I have a question, but because I was talking to one atheist friend of mine, and he told me this. He said, "Okay."
You have an atheist friend? See, Muslims can be friends with other people, right?
Yeah, I was doing something that we started with the Big Bang, and
Yes.
and then I was discussing about how perfect God or this Creator is. Then he said, "Okay, wait, I heard something about God, Allah. That's not perfect." I said, "What is it?" He said that now your God is merciful, yeah? I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, now how can someone like have absolute mercy because God has absolute of everything? So and yet he has hellfire."
Yes. Good question. Well, that's a straw man. A straw man in logic is a misrepresentation of someone's perspective. You don't believe God has infinite mercy from that perspective. He is merciful infinitely, but His mercy is not infinite. Because what does that mean? It doesn't have any practical application. What we believe is He is the merciful, meaning any conceptualization of mercy you will never reach. Because God is the merciful. He's always going to be greater than any concept of mercy. But in the Islamic theological tradition, we reconcile His names and attributes together. Okay, so for example, the theologians will take the aspect that He is the Creator, Al-Khaliq, with the fact that He is the Just. Now, if they were both absolute, there would be a contradiction, because if He created your actions. If He created everything, He also created your actions. If He created your actions, then He can't be just, because He's sending you to paradise or hellfire based on something that He created, not what you did. So what they reconcile is saying, what we mean by He is the creator of your actions, is that He created the capacity and the power and the intermediary causes for you to use via your free choice to enact. And you're judged based upon your free choice. You see the reconciliation between Him being the just and Him being the creator. We don't consider them in absolute terms. It's actually not part of our tradition to do that. We reconcile His names and attributes, but we know and we understand them in a transcendental sense. They transcend any human anthropomorphic conceptualization, but they're not infinite per se. I don't think there's an Arabic word for infinite for the attributes. Yeah, it's just al. It's the definite particle meaning the most. So any type of concept of mercy, He's going to be greater than that. You're never going to reach it. And reconcile the names and attributes together. Okay? So it's a misrepresentation of who we believe God is.
Are
one of the main reasons why some atheists may not believe in God is they may give you that if there's an all-powerful God and He has all those attributes there, why does He allow all the bad things that go on in the world to happen?
Yes.
And I would just like to ask how you would approach that question in a more philosophical, logic way.
Yes.
Than the theological.
Yeah, that's a good question, bro. This is what you call the problem of evil. I don't think the problem of evil is a problem for the Muslim in any shape or form. Because the problem of evil in a logical perspective is the following. A good, all-powerful God exists. Evil and suffering exists. Therefore, a good and all-powerful God can't exist. As David Hume wrote concerning this problem, the problem of evil. He was saying that basically, if God is good and powerful, then He should want good all the time. But there's evil. So therefore, He's either not powerful, or He's evil because He wants it to happen. So there's not a good, all-powerful God in the first place. But there are some hidden, daring premises, daring presuppositions. Firstly, it doesn't follow there isn't a good and all-powerful being, just because it's evil. It doesn't logically follow. It's not necessarily true. And the reason for that are some hidden, daring premises or assumptions. One of them include that God is only good and all-powerful. It's a straw man. They think God is only good and all-powerful. We say, you misrepresented our view of God. God is also the just. And He's also the wise. He's also al-wadud, meaning in Arabic, the excessively loving. So He's the wise. If He is the wise, then it follows there's wisdom behind this evil and suffering. If you don't know the wisdom, that's an argument from ignorance. Argumentum ad ignoration. You can't argue from not knowing. Because there is wisdom, it's divine wisdom. And you're not supposed to know all the divine wisdom, by the way, because by definition, since it's divine, it transcends your knowledge. So they've misrepresented the divine reality. It also assumes that God hasn't given us any good reason why He's permitted evil. Because people are assuming that we're here to party and be it's all about paradise. Let's boogie, man. Yeah? But it's not. Life is a test. In the major chapters of the Quran, God says life is a test. You're here to pass a test. And God doesn't burden a soul more than He can bear. So you're going to be tested to see who's best indeed. And also we have an emotional argument that really reconciles it emotionally as well, which is that a Muslim who gets buried under rubble is a martyr according to the prophetic tradition. That includes earthquake. A Muslim who drowns is a martyr. That includes the tsunami. What does a martyr mean? They go straight to paradise. Virgin first class certificate. Isn't it? First class. So the point is we have an emotional response, we have a logical response, and the whole argument has two daring assumptions, that God is only good and all-powerful, and that He hasn't given us good reasons to allow evil in the first place, which is both false, and we've exposed it. And the problem of evil is actually a problem for the atheist, because you can't reconcile a life. How can you reconcile a life full of suffering, and then you become worm buffet? It's dark. This is why Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher, he wrote an essay on suicide. And he also, so did David Hume, by the way, I think. It was called On Suicide. And Arthur Schopenhauer said that he wished the universe never existed. Because he knew the reality. You take God out of the picture, it's not that happy, man. It's not that good. Existential crisis. Questions? Take one minute. Ash?
Yeah, sure.
Is that Ash for Ashley?
Yes. Yeah. You said about the things having purpose, like a chair has purpose in the moth. And when you said that, well, the moth has a purpose and we're more complex and we must have a purpose because of that, is that not displaying the same kind of arrogance that you claim we were following our ego if we didn't submit to Allah? Because you're thinking that moth doesn't look desirable from my perspective.
Yes.
I'm much better than that.
Yes.
A minute ago you said to have that arrogance to question Allah was... Aren't these contradictory?
They are, yeah. But I think you misunderstood what I said. I said doesn't it intuitively and emotionally make sense that there is a purpose? And even if there isn't a purpose, it doesn't matter, because if we can establish rationally God exists, and the Quran is from Him, and He's told us what purpose is, then there is a purpose automatically, right? But the reason I was mentioning that is I'm trying to open the emotional and intellectual window to think. As I said, let's open that window to think about the reality, if there is a purpose or not. There may not be, based upon my analogies because they're not very strong, but I use them to show us in a way that, you know what, even if we're the same as the moth, then it still follows we should have a purpose, because the moth has a purpose. You see? So even, we don't have to be above the moth, let's be the same as a chair. It's inanimate, we're inanimate. It's irrational, we're irrational. Yeah? It still has a purpose, so let's be the same level. So let's remove our arrogance, go to the same level as the moth in the chair, then it will still follow that maybe we still have a purpose. You see?
Okay, I'll talk after this, I don't want to take over.
No, fine, do
I'll
no
just
problem,
say,
bro.
you're imparting that purpose with your consciousness.
Yes, you
The chair doesn't give the chair next to it purpose.
Yeah, of course it doesn't.
So
But what you're showing them the indispensable nature of us seeking patterns. Like, you know, Christopher Hitchens, he passed away, I think last year, from throat cancer. He was one of the 4 horsemen of the new atheist movement. He would always give this cliche, which I found so annoying. It was like, well, you think things are cause and effect and they have a purpose because we're pattern-seeking animals. I said, yeah, but isn't that statement pattern-seeking as well? All you've shown is the indispensable nature of us using patterns. And that's the irrational nature of his point. It's like saying, well, you're talking to me, you're using language because that's the only way that we can express thought. Yeah, I know. And you've just done that too. Do you see? It was like a self-defeating statement. Well, you just believe there's a God because you're pattern-seeking animals. Yeah, but your very conclusion that we're pattern-seeking is because you were pattern-seeking in the first place. Because how would you know that we're pattern-seeking unless you're already pattern-seeking? So it shows the indispensable nature of us seeking patterns, you see.
But that statement confirms that we're pattern-seeking. It doesn't confirm God.
No, I know that. I'm not saying
so
that. Obviously, I'm not saying since we're pattern-seeking, therefore God exists. But the point I'm trying to say is, it shows also the indispensable nature that things have a purpose. If you run away from that, then it's almost, we can't have a conversation. Do you see? That's my point. And this is even like, you know, when we talk about evolution, not that I'm rejecting the science, but, you know, Richard Dawkins was asked a question about how can we explain life coming from non-life? You know, the biggest question in evolution, the origin of the first living cell. He was like, I don't know. But those questions are still there because it's part of our indispensable nature that we seek purpose and we seek patterns. And he said, and this is online, that came from aliens. And he'd rather believe in aliens than not believe in God. That's why it doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, so the point is, but we could even reject these analogies because they're almost irrelevant to the discussion. They're more like a rhetorical ploy to make us think about purpose. But the point is, rationally we could justify the good way that God exists, and we could justify the Quran is from God. So even if you didn't believe in purpose, these realities are like a slap in the face saying, well, look, think about these. Do you see? So it's more like, it was like an introductory, intellectual, spiritual, emotional ploy to make us think. And just to introduce the session. So it wasn't like really like, we therefore must have a purpose. But rather, let's think about it. You see?
One more question.
I've been asked actually, I think you did answer to you have control over the action. Or it seems to be free. And if this is the case, where do you get from?
Okay, that's a good answer. The uncle is saying, do we have control of our actions? If everything has been predestined and pre-written, as in the Islamic tradition, then why do we get punished? Now, this is to do with the foreknowledge of God. Now, God's foreknowledge doesn't make us do an action. For example, if I knew my son was going to wake up and have Cocoa Pops for his breakfast, and I know that because he's doing it all the time, and that's the only thing he likes to eat in the morning, for example. In me knowing that he's going to have Cocoa Pops, did my knowledge of that make him have Cocoa Pops? No. So God's foreknowledge doesn't make us do an action. Now you may think, but God's already written down what we're going to do. Yes, but that's a different question. And that's fine, because even if God knows what we're going to do, and He's written it down that we're going to do that, how does that mean that He's forced us to do that? Because in Him writing that we're going to do X, Y, Z, it was, for example, Hamza is going to do X, Y, and Z with his free choice. And there's nothing logically incoherent about that. I usually draw two big circles. This big circle represents God's absolute will, and here we have free choice. It's that small circle within the bigger circle. And logically, there's no incoherence in that. Who likes playing cards? You? Little sister going, now, say you're playing cards. Destiny is like the cards you've been given. Free choice is you playing the game. So you've been given a set of cards, okay? But you know, in poker, you could arrange your cards, you might miss the best card, you maybe didn't know how to put it, you don't know all the rules. You're using your free choice to use those cards. But you've been handed those cards as your destiny. And then you're using your free choice to manifest it. I think that's a good analogy. But even say chronological perspective, God predestined, God writing down what we're going to do and what's the word? Predestine our actions, yeah, doesn't follow that we now are forced to do certain actions, because in that predestination or predestiny, it is with the fact that we have free choice. And that doesn't have any logical incoherence. So God predestined our actions, and those actions are predestined with the fact that we have free choice to do those actions. And in math, that's not an issue. It's logically coherent. Now you may not understand how that works, but you not knowing how doesn't negate the logic. I think that's the best way to answer the question. You know what? You know how God, bro, you know how God answers this question? It's beautiful, very existential. He goes, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Basically, shut up. Where are you going? Sort yourself out, yeah? You don't know. فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Sort yourself out, yeah? That's it. It's the best way of doing it. Just, who cares? Even if God made you do everything, be the person that you want God to have made you to do good. That's the easiest way of doing it. That is beyond your reality. But yeah, that's how I answer the question. Call it a day? Oh, last question, of course.
Were you always Muslim?
No, I wasn't always Muslim.
So what made you convert to Islam?
I was forced into the religion with the sword. Like most Muslims, you know? So, that's it really. And that sword was the will of the divine reality. That's the metaphor. So we believe God wills this to happen. But it's everything I've told you today in a nutshell. For me it was rational and it was emotive. You know, when I first read the Quran, I was like, close the book. I don't like, yeah? I was like, forget this. But then I realized, look, you know, my mom used to make a dish, a food dish, and I didn't like it. But me not liking it doesn't mean the food dish wasn't in front of my face and I have to eat it. So I didn't want to judge truth based upon my current disposition, because we are a product of our social constructs, as we said in the beginning. So I realized we have to have something rational, or rational with intuition. And therefore, I didn't want to judge the book just based upon my own limited realities. Because sometimes you could open the Quran and you could find the verse, kill them wherever you find them. And then I could just stop the conversation. I say, I'm not reading this book again. But if you're more open-minded, you see the context of the verse. People were attacking the Muslims. They had to fight in the battlefield to defend themselves, because if they turn the other cheek, they'll have no cheeks left. Yeah? So all those things, right? So, and in reality, God opens your heart to a better understanding of each tradition. And that's my advice to the Muslims as well. You know, when Muslims talk about atheists, I always do this test in my courses. Now, ignore what you see online, because I do change. I'm a human being. If you see my own stuff on YouTube, it's a very arrogant idiot. You know? I'm still an arrogant idiot, but no with a capital A. Yeah? So the thing is, for example, I say when we teach people how to articulate a positive case to Islam to the wider community, I say, right, the word atheist, what comes to mind? And all the Muslims put their hand up. You know what answers you get? Cold, arrogant, rejecting the truth, fuel for hellfire, yeah? Richard Dawkins, idiot, ignorant, you have all these words. I'm like, oh my God. And I say, you pugnacious fools. You're doing the same thing that you accuse other people doing to the Muslim community. Terrorists, backward, yeah? And I said, look, no wonder you can't get along with people. Because when you try and connect with them, are you connecting with him or with your judgment of who he is? Are you connecting with the atheist or are you connecting with the judgment of who the atheist is? And this is why you don't get along. And you will never know the only reason you're an atheist is because because his mum passed away when he was 3 years old, and he doesn't have the answer why. Think about that. Human beings were like that, man. It's drama and reality. It's two circles in life. Let me draw these two circles and we'll finish, okay? One circle, another circle. This is your drama. This is reality. We think they're both the same. Our drama is what? My limited experience. My small limited experiences. My limited perceptions. My internal voice based upon all these things that constantly is like a radio playing that judges other people. And reality is what is. Breaking it down to its reductionist components. Yeah? We think it's the same. And that's why human beings never connect with themselves or with other people, because we think, no, my drama is the reality. He said that because he does hate me. Not because he may have had a bad day or he's got his own issues or he's a human being. No, it's because he hates me. Do you know why? Because my dad hated me. And my friend when I was 7 hated me. When I was in school, everybody hated me. Happens all the time. Happened to me. Yeah? With my father. And you know, I learned about this, and I called my dad up. I said, Dad, I've made you feel like an incompetent dad for 8 years. I'm sorry, I love you. I know you love me. Everything you've done, even if we disagree, you're not Muslim, regardless, you're still my hero. And everything you've done, because I know you love me. You've done mistakes, it's because you love me, not because you're evil. He was crying for 15 minutes. I mean, my dad was so close, man, he talks to me about anything. And that's what we have to be as human beings. Just don't impose your drama on the reality. But we do it all the time. And it's very hard for us to take a snapshot of ourselves and understand we're in this drama. It must be like that because everybody's hated me before. So he hates me too. Yeah? That's what people with low self-esteem, they have that issue a lot, yeah? It's always been like that. Yeah, but you've always had the drama, so you've seen life through those lenses all the time. It isn't it? Yeah? And usually it's because of an experience in parenting or with our parents or something happened. And we use that as a lens for our whole life. And we have to go backwards and unravel and think, you know what? Reality is reality. The past is meaningless. And that's why we have the concept of tawbah in Islam, which is repentance. Once you sincerely repent, even if you killed 99,000 people, you should believe that you're forgiven if you did it according to the conditions of repentance. So the past is meaningless now. Move on. If we didn't have that concept, you would never have the civilization of Islam, because the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet, they would bury their daughters alive. They would do the most atrocious things. And Tawbah, which means to come back to God linguistically, if that wasn't in place to show that the past is now meaningless, they wouldn't have moved forward. Isn't it? Anyway, I'm not saying that I've adopted this philosophy, I'm still a human being, but it's something useful for us, yeah? Thank you very much, guys.